On today's episode, we have Jeff Kirchick, VP of Enterprise Sales at NextCaller and author of his brand new book, Authentic Selling. Stay tuned to learn how to break through the noise and make prospecting fun. Also, Jeff talks about embracing your weird as authenticity matters in today's world. So your success is our success, so let's get started.
From the heart of Silicon Valley in beautiful San Francisco, California, welcome to the SDR Live podcast with Marcos and Andy.
All right, glad to be back on another episode of the SDR Live. Today, we have Jeff Kirchick. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I'm really excited to do this with you.
Yeah, we're super pumped. And the reason why is because today is a little bit of an interesting topic that I think is really going to help not only SDRs, but those that are selling today, which is authentic selling. But I see a side note there, embrace your weird. So I'm really excited to get into it. But for the audience that is not aware of what you do, can you give us just a quick round of introduction?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jeff Kirchick. I'm the head of sales for a company called NextCaller. NextCaller is based in New York City. We're a Y Combinator company. We focus on call center fraud and authentication. We're servicing mostly Fortune 500, enterprise brands, mainly financial institutions, but a variety of industries like telco, cable, healthcare, travel, and hospitality. The product is a authentication tool for contact centers. So it basically authenticates that you're the right person and that you're not a fraudulent, you're not committing fraudulent activity. I've been with NextCaller for about 7 years. I was one of the first employees at the company. And I've been working in sales for over a decade. We are, doing inbound, outbound. We have a small SDR team. So we have 3 SDRs, myself, sales engineer, and an AE. So it's a very small team. We're kind of a niche product in a kind of very focused industry, but we've been very successful. We're servicing some of the largest financial institutions, cable companies, et cetera, on the planet. And I always say that the best month, the quarter, the current one is always the best. If it's not the best, it means you're doing something wrong. You should always be doing better and better, getting happier and happier with how things are going. You might not always be having the best results, but you should always be smarter today than you were the day before. And for that reason, I always say that the best month in the quarter is the one that we're in right now. So that's a little bit about myself. I'm not based in New York right now. I'm in Cape Cod, actually. I guess I'm repping the Cape Cod today.
Nice.
But there we go. I left the city due to COVID, but I guess if there's one other thing about me that I'll share with the audience, and hopefully they don't turn this off after hearing this. I'm a diehard Boston sports fan. That's my fun fact. I realize that could be a polarizing thing. Boston sports teams seem like they might be on the decline right now, so maybe people will be a little more empathetic than usual.
Yep. No more Tom Brady. Pierce the heart there, but that's a good introduction. And I'm curious on your end, right? So you're working with these, really big 500 organizations. So obviously, like through COVID, it's really hard to get to, these HVTs, these high value targets, right? You got to break through the noise. So I'm curious on your end, like what is I think authentic selling is your tactic, but I'm just curious on your end, like any tactics that you have to kind of break through that noise per se.
Yeah, sure. So, we can talk a little bit about the problem statement and then some of the tactics. So, Marcos, you were just kind of talking about, how do you break through the noise when there's so much stimulus, right? There's people being contacted by pretty much everybody. Your inbox, all of our inboxes are probably flooded with marketing emails ourselves. If you go just to your Gmail right now, I bet you've got, 100 emails from marketers who you've subscribed for and you forgot about, right?
Yeah.
What's made it even harder is with COVID-19, cold calling is even harder than it usually is because people are not in their office. Can you call someone on their cell phone? Do they like that? It can be a little more challenging to cold call people, especially if they're at home with like a dog and, kids yelling in the background or something like that. People are a little more stressed out naturally, given what's going on. And on top of that, prospecting is already pretty hard and tedious. And I think what you'll see as we walk through this is that what I would advocate is to be, I call it like being weirder than Waldo is kind of the expression. I don't know, you guys are a little younger than me, so I don't know if you guys are familiar with Waldo. We probably are, but
of course.
All right, cool. Yeah. So yeah, the thing with Waldo is that he was dressing up like a kind of a crazy person, right? Like he would wear a striped hat, a striped shirt, and he was still impossible to find in those books, And the reason I like to use him as an example is because you can be really weird and still not stand out from the crowd. So, Marcos, to answer your question, I think it really comes down to creativity. You need to be creative to stand out from the crowd. Like one thing that we've done, not to give away something for later, but that we've done that's been successful is using Cameo. Cameo is the website where you can book a celebrity or a person of import to do a shout out for somebody. Okay. So if you watch like Real Housewives or something, you could book like a Real Housewives. I don't know if there's a character, they're real people, but you could book somebody to like give a shout out to someone. Or if it's like even like Brett Favre is on there, like the NFL quarterback. So we've actually been using Cameo. Like if we see that somebody's a fan of a certain sports team, there was a guy who's like a St. Louis Blues fan. We hired the St. Louis Blues PA announcer to give him a cameo. And in the cameo, he's like, hey, you should meet with NextCaller because they want to talk to you about call center authentication. But this is after he does 3 minutes about, working for the St. Louis Blues. And I'm going to give you a shout out. So that's a really great way to connect with somebody. It probably cost us like $20 to book that cameo for that individual. They're a diehard blues fan. There's nobody else who's reaching out to them with a shout out from somebody that they really admire. Of course, he has to take the meeting with us, right? Because we went out of our way to do something special for him. So I think that that's what it requires. And in this age of automation, that's probably not the thing that people want to hear, because what I'm advocating for is to do more personal things and to get away from the automation. But that's the crux of my hypothesis, that you need to be a human as much as possible.
I love that. I have a follow-up question. I always love to hear about kind of the process to getting to an idea. How would you say like you came across the cameo of like, oh, let's do this for this prospect? What was the story about that?
Sure. So it might help for me to talk through my process in general, but I think once I do, it'll help kind of maybe pave the way for how we came up with the idea for the cameo. So hopefully that's all right, Andy. It might take me a couple minutes to fully answer your question, but I want to contextualize it as much as I can. First and foremost, we know that this wave of machine learning and artificial intelligence is coming, right? There used to be BDR teams for inbound leads. If somebody filled out an inbound lead on your website, you'd have a BDR team reach out to that individual. That's now being replaced by machines, right? And you can teach a machine a sales training program. If you learn MEDDIC or BANT or Sandler training, you could theoretically take those principles and program a machine to understand those principles. So with that being said, I think it's more important than ever, if you want to protect your job, to cling to your humanity being the one thing that separates you from the machines. But also, people naturally have an understanding of when they're being sold to and when they're not. And you want this to kind of work like Inception. You guys have seen the movie Inception, I'm sure, with Leonardo DiCaprio. Classic. You want the customer to feel like it's their idea. You don't want them to think they're being sold on an idea. In the movie Inception, they don't just yell at the guy to dissolve his business. They go into his dreams several layers deep, and they plant this idea that his father wanted him to be his own man, and he comes to the conclusion himself. So authenticity matters in everything that you do, because when you're authentic, you allow people to come to their own conclusions. And the thing is that we're all a little bit weird, and we can embrace that. Even if you don't think that you're weird, you probably are. You might sing to your cat, in your free time. Maybe you sing weird songs in the shower, or you have weird rituals. The thing is, if you peel the onion with pretty much anybody, everybody has a unique story. And I don't even know how you define normal. It's very subjective. So the weirder you are, the better, because A, it helps you stick out from the pack. It makes you weirder than Waldo, but also it shows people that you are being your authentic self. People like that. They like authenticity. So Andy, where I'm going with this is how I came up with the idea is I actually was using Cameo in my personal life. Like I got one for my dad for his birthday. He really liked it. Someone got one for me. It was really funny. I got an Anthony Scaramucci cameo for my older brother because my brother's in politics. And I saw the reactions that they had. And I thought to myself, well, I mean, people love this stuff. Why wouldn't I do this? This is an authentic thing that I like to do in my free time. It's weird. It's different. So I'm going to embrace that.
Wow. Yeah. I feel like, just me, being pretty new to sales, I've been in the game for about 2 years. When I was starting as an SDR, I'm not sure if you see this, but usually SDRs, they come into an org and they have to, ask for ban or, it's a repeatable process that managers are trying to tell them, right? And what I've seen is that the SDRs end up going away from themselves and what is truly unique to themselves. So this is maybe a little bit off topic, but any tips? Like I know you're talking about just embracing it, but what if you get pushback from your manager? What would you tell like an SDR to say?
Yeah, well, so I recommend a formula that I think works pretty well and can actually be more or less, it's malleable in the sense that I think that most SDR like in the sense that I think what I'm recommending that people do would fit under the purview of what anyone else recommends in a sense, in that I don't think that they would find it. I guess it's flexible is probably the right way to put it. I'll kind of walk you through what I mean here. There's 3 steps to what I think makes an email very successful. And the first is I'll explain them. The excuse, which is like why you're interrupting their day, the value proposition, which is the value you bring, and then the ask. The second 2 are very straightforward, so I'll spend most of my time on the excuse. The excuse is by far the most important part of the email. So to give you an example, like let's say I was lost and I didn't know Andy, and I tapped him on the shoulder and asked for directions. Andy would probably be a little bit creeped out. First of all, you shouldn't be tapping anybody on the shoulder during COVID, let alone a stranger. So he'd probably be like, why are you tapping me on the shoulder? But if I didn't make an excuse and I just asked presumptuously for directions, he'd be like, I don't know where to go. Good luck. But if I say, hey, Andy, I'm new here. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm sorry to bug you. Sorry, I'm wearing a mask. Hopefully you're not bugged out by me tapping you. Can you give me directions? He'd probably give me directions. I made a good excuse for interrupting his day. When you're interrupting somebody's day, you need to have an excuse. So when you're reaching out to somebody, that's what the excuse is. But the excuse should always be this weird personal thing. I'm going to show you some examples after this, but the weird personal thing that connects you to that person. And I'm not going to get too deep into that now because we're going to see some literal examples of that in a moment. The second 2 pieces are straightforward. Value proposition, how can we help you, which is 1 to 2 sentences, speaking in terms of outcomes generally, high level, or why, the why or an outcome or what resonate with people. And then the ask. And I don't want to spoil Game of Thrones for anybody, but at the end of Game of Thrones, Bran Stark, says, I didn't come all this way for nothing after, marching through the snow to try to become the king. And, same thing with your email. You didn't write this email for nothing. You didn't come all this way to come up with an excuse and a value proposition not to ask for something. So you need to ask for a meeting at the end. This formula, I think, allows somebody to be their creative, eccentric, weird self without compromising what most training programs would want for somebody. And I'm going to show you that in the next couple slides.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm super excited to kind of see some of your tactical strategies, that you've shared with us. So if you can share the next slide, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah. So this is one of my favorite examples of an excuse. I wrote this like 7 years ago when I was just getting started at NextCaller. So let me give you the quick backstory, and I hope that all your audience won't judge me for the backstory because it's a little bit embarrassing, but I have a cat. She's actually sleeping next to me right now. Her name is Zoe.
Nice.
I got Zoe like 8 years ago, and I created a Twitter account for Zoe. And Zoe would tweet a lot of funny things. It was really just my friends. They thought it was funny. It was nothing more, nothing less. But there was like actually a dialogue that Zoe was having with American Airlines on Twitter, which was particularly funny. And it actually ended up leading to Fancy Feast sending her a bunch of free food. Oh. It's a story for another day, but the American Airlines social media people were really doing a funny back and forth with my cat on Twitter. And I share a screenshot here as part of it, but there was actually like a very lengthy back and forth between Zoe and American Airlines. And, she was asking if they serve Fancy Feast on board and stuff like that. And, I was reaching out to them about trying to have a meeting, and my subject line is American Airlines tweets with my cat. Now, if you're somebody who works at American Airlines, presumably you're getting hit with salespeople like me all day long, but I can guarantee you none of them are sending a message about their cat tweeting with the airline. That's just really strange. So you're probably going to open up that email, right? And every part of the email, the goal is not to sell somebody something, it's to get them to the next step of the email. You could write the best email in the world, and if your subject line stinks, it doesn't matter because nobody opened it and read it, right? So each part of the email is to get somebody to the next step. This subject line, you have to open it. There's nobody who gets that subject line and doesn't open it. And then you'll see here in the email, as you read through it, I talk about this interaction I had with their social media team. I'm self-aware. I tell them not to judge me for this. I should attach it to the email. I said, in spite of my weird cat story, I'm wondering if you'd be interested in meeting with me. I'm a fellow soccer fan. The guy was a huge soccer fan based on my research. And I talk about going to Brazil for the World Cup and flying American Airlines on my way there. This is a hyper-personalized message. I've done my research on this individual. I know some things that he's interested in. I've tied it into my message. I have this unique, weird story about their brand and me that ties us together. And the excuse is a good excuse. I'm reaching out to you because I'm really fond of your brand. I had this really unique story about my cat interacting with you guys on social media. Your social media team needs a raise. You clearly care about customer experience. We're a customer experience brand. Let's talk. And surely enough, they ended up taking the meeting with me. I was really proud of this outreach. Here's another example that I'll show you guys. I found somebody who worked for a financial organization who went to the University of North Carolina and was an English major. Okay. And I was an English major as well. A lot of people made fun of me. They thought, I would never have a job after college for being an English major. Wow. One thing that, I know about people who go to UNC is that they hate Duke. And actually, most people hate Duke unless they went to Duke. I guess it's kind of like, being a Patriots fan, I guess. It's like, you're a fan of the Patriots if you're a fan, and if you're not, you probably hate them. So, my message was hello from a fellow English major. That was the subject. That's, again, something that is personal to her. High likelihood that she'll open this message. And I kind of let off with a couple things, real happy to see a fellow English major in the workforce. They told us both that we wouldn't have a job after college, but here we are. And now I'm selling something to you. The second part of this is, Duke stinks. And, it's really, I hate Duke too, basically, and again, this is like a really funny personal message. And she says, really clever email. I saw your LinkedIn last time I looked, but I'd be happy to connect with you to learn more. So this is an example of somebody who might not have otherwise taken a meeting with us. She's not even sure whether or not she's the right person until we get on the phone. But, she says she thinks it's a clever email, and that's what ultimately allows us to connect. So these are a couple examples. There's many more I could share, but I'll pause here and, see what kind of questions that introduces.
Yeah, I think I'll go real quick, Andy. I think this is great. I mean, I typically you see emails and they're kind of just standard, right? It's more of like spray and pray approach. And even like personalization, I haven't seen this level of personalization in a while as far as like the detail you're getting. So on your end, how much time are you spending to personalize each one of these emails?
Fantastic question. So at the end of the day, it kind of depends on what information is available about somebody. The more information that's available, actually, the less time that it takes, ironically, because for me, at least, once I've discovered what my hook is going to be, it's pretty straightforward, what I'm going to say. I mean, for me, that comes naturally. And I think that can differ for some other people. They might actually be better at researching, but have a harder time actually putting pen to paper. So, it could be really as little as a few minutes. If there's a lot of information, if I can go on this person's LinkedIn and see that she went to UNC and was an English major, the idea is just right in my head, right there. I'm an English major. I hate Duke. I bet she hates Duke. That's going to be my hook. But for some people, there's not much that's about them. And you actually really end up needing to spend some time researching them. You might have to find their Twitter. You might have to see if they wrote something in Google, if they've written anything that touches you in some way. And it might be that you honestly really can't find much about a person, in which case you probably need to turn to something that's more topical. So if like there's a Star Wars movie that just came out, maybe I'll use like a Yoda meme or something like that to try to, there was few weeks ago. I mean, I think no matter how political you are on one side or the other, I think everybody agreed that the debate a few weeks ago was like horrible, that it was tough to watch, and I think if you had emailed somebody the following day, again, just being like, hey, since last night was a bust, maybe today we can get off on the right foot. Like you just need to try to think of things to riff off of that, that will be meaningful to anybody. If you can't find information on somebody, it really shouldn't take you more than 5 to 10 minutes. Like if you're spending more than 5 to 10 minutes trying to figure this out, it means that you're starting to waste your time a little bit. So I'd say that it doesn't need to take too long. It doesn't take much. It could just be simply someone's alma mater. It could be their major in college. It could be something they wrote recently. It could be topical to the company they work for. There's a lot of different things. It's just about identifying it and then moving on that thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's usually what I tell a lot of my mentees, like you just need to find like that one nugget of insight or something that's going to buy you the 15 minutes of time, or even on a cold call, like the next 30 seconds of time, right? And it's valuable to them. So I'm curious on your end, like what are some of these wins or impacts that you've been seeing across your team with this kind of approach?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the number one thing that I appreciate the most, and this is not necessarily a quantifiable thing, but I still cherish this more than any other metric that's out there, is that we get complimented all the time for our outreach. The SDRs on our team get compliments from people. Sometimes they even get rejected, but also complimented. So the person will say, hey, this was the best email I've ever received. I'm just not the right person. I'll like try to find you the right person, or like, this is just not something I need right now, but like, I want to let you know this was the best email. Like, thank you for taking the time. That happens a lot one way or the other, where they either take the meeting and compliment the SDR, or they don't take the meeting, but still compliment the SDR. What actually warms my heart is like, if an SDR sets a meeting for me and I'm on the phone with the person and they say, they'll actually go out of their way to compliment the SDR when they're talking to me, and they'll let it be known from the front, like the get-go, like the only reason I'm taking your call is because your outreach was so great. And like, I don't mind that. I actually like to hear that. It's like, look, I would never have had an opportunity to speak with you otherwise. Maybe I can change your mind. And that's my job, right? Is to make somebody feel like it's worth their time. So I think the number one, I don't know if it's quantifiable, but we get complimented constantly about going out of our way to make somebody's day. That being said, nearly 100% of our meetings are qualified as well. Wow. A very high qualification rate. It's never below like 85% in a given month. So very highly qualified meetings. And I think the reason for that is because we can actually target high level decision makers with this type of outreach, and it can work. And that's what allows the meetings to be qualified. So this works at the highest levels. Over 80% of our reps historically are meeting or exceeding quota on the inside sales team. I just think that's a testament to the quality of the outreach. And last but not least, I mentioned Cameo earlier. We're also using Reach Desk for gifting, like sending, $5 gift cards to Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks. People take a meeting, and then the AEs will send a bigger gift after the meeting. But that stuff's working as well. We get a lot of praise. And again, I think what it comes down to is we're all human. We have to treat people like human beings. That involves being quirky. It involves personalizing, sending a nice gift as a thank you. I mean, even when you do an interview, you thank the interviewer for their time afterwards, right? Like, why don't you do that to a customer? Why don't you tell the customer thank you for their time? It's a simple thing that you do. Send them a small token of your appreciation. So we just need to get out of this mindset of treating customers any differently than we would treat our best friends. I think if you embrace your weird, quirky self and you treat people in that, and honestly, that involves standing up to people too. You shouldn't constantly be deferential to a customer just because they're a customer. If a customer's acting out or being too demanding, you need to stand up for yourself, just the way that you would in any relationship with a friend or a girlfriend or a boyfriend. You're not going to let them walk all over you. People have more respect for you, I think, if you act authentically. So I think these other approaches like Cameo and Reach Desk are converting for us as well at a very high clip because they feel personal to people.
Jeff, thank you so much. I couldn't agree with you more, especially in COVID, in this pandemic. Now more than ever, what we're missing is the human element. And if you can kind of add that back with some of the more hyper personalizations and add that human element to give people a reason to connect, to see that empathy. Thank you for sharing. Like it's so important to hear that right now.
Absolutely. No, I think it's something that actually helps people breathe a sigh of relief if they can embrace it, because it's actually very easy to do, to be yourself. It's very hard to learn how to be somebody else. And so I think if people start to embrace this, they'll actually feel a lot more relaxed in their day to day. And that's, I talked earlier at the beginning, how do you make this fun? How do you make prospecting fun? I think it makes it harder for people if you tell them you have to follow these rules. Nobody likes having to follow rules, right? But if you tell people, hey, I just want you to be yourself and work hard, I mean, look, obviously there's some guidance you give around that. You want to rein people in to a certain extent. You don't want them saying stuff that's too weird or offensive, but I think that it actually helps people relax as well.
Awesome. And just thank you again, Jeff. I've learned so much today from Cameo, Reach Desk, learning how to personalize, hyper-personalization, et cetera. How can our audience connect with you who want to learn more?
Yeah. So my information is on here on the screen. You can email me at jeff@nextcaller.com. I'm actually publishing a book that'll be coming out in the next month or two. It's called Authentic Selling, How to Use the Principles of Sales in Everyday Life. I go into much more detail in that book about using some of these formulas, but also teaching some other important concepts about authenticity and selling. So that book will be out on Amazon.com in the foreseeable future. So I'd encourage people to check that out as well. Give a little plug for the book. And feel free to reach out to me directly here as well.
Yeah, awesome. I'm excited to read your book. Can't wait to share this with the audience. I think they're really going to find this very valuable. So thanks again, Jeff. Really appreciate your time and hope you have a great day.
You too, guys. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the SDR Live podcast. If you like this episode, please share, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you tune in next week and have a fantastic week.